Welcome to another episode of Follow the Brand. I am your host, Grant McGaugh, CEO of 5-Star BDM, a 5-star personal branding and business development company. I want to take you on a journey that takes another deep dive into the world of personal branding and business development using compelling personal story, business conversations, and tips to improve your personal brand. By listening to the Follow the Brand podcast series, you will be able to differentiate yourself from the competition and allow you to build trust with prospective clients and employers. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. Make it one that will set you apart, build trust, and reflect who you are. Developing your 5-star personal brand is a great way to demonstrate your skills and knowledge. If you have any questions for me or my guests, please email me at grant.mcgaugh, spelled M-C-G-A-U-G-H, at 5-star BDM, B for brand, D for development, M for masters.com. Now let's begin with our next 5-star episode on Follow the Brand. Welcome to the Follow Brand Podcast. I am Grant McGaugh, CEO of 5-Star BDM, where we help you to build a 5-star brand that people will follow. And today we are diving deep into the intersection of healthcare, technology, and advocacy right here in South Florida. And whether you are working in healthcare, interested in health tech, or passionate about shaping policies that affect our communities, this episode is for you. And as someone who has spent over 20 years helping organizations transform and grow, particularly in the healthcare and technology sectors, I am excited to explore how innovation and legislative advocacy can drive real, meaningful change. So today's conversation is especially timely as we prepare for the upcoming HIMSS Integrate Conference, a premier event that focuses on advancing healthcare through technology and collaboration. And I am very happy to have two highly respected leaders with us today. First, we have State Senator Ana Marie Rodriguez, representing Florida's 40th District. Senator Rodriguez has a unique perspective, having served on both the local and state level. And she's been a key advocate for healthcare policy and technology initiatives in our region. Also joining us is Lisa Rawlins, Senior Vice President of the Gardner Group. With over 3 decades of experience in healthcare administration and policymaking, Lisa brings a wealth of knowledge on how advocacy and policy directly impact healthcare systems and the people they serve. In today's episode, we'll be pulling back the curtain on how healthcare policy, technology, and advocacy intersect and what it means for South Florida and beyond. We will also touch on what you can expect from the upcoming HIMSS Integrate Conference, including key themes like health IT, legislation, and how advocacy plays a critical role in shaping the future of healthcare. So whether you are attending the conference, work in healthcare, or just want to understand how technology and policy shape the care we all receive, you are in for a very insightful discussion. So let's get started on the Follow Brand Podcast, where we are building a 5-star brand that you can follow. Welcome to the Follow Brand Podcast. This is Grant McGaugh, your host. And today we're going to keep it local right here in South Florida. We're going to have a conversation around healthcare, around technology, around advocacy from a state level, a legislation level, things that really a lot of people don't know. They need to find out about as we make this journey further down the line into healthcare and what healthcare will mean for our people, specifically in the Miami-Dade County area and beyond. So let me get some people introduced. We're going to have a kind of conversation a little different from what I've done in the past. Meaning, I'm going to have Lisa Rawlins interview Senator Anna Marie Rodriguez, and we're going to do this in a style that has never been done before on the Follow Brand podcast to give you a little bit more insight into the upcoming HIMSS Integrate Conference. So I'm going to give it away to Lisa, get things rolling, and I'll be back in about a half hour or so. Thank you very much.
Grant, thank you so much. I appreciate you inviting us here today. And good afternoon, everyone. I am Lisa Rawlins, Senior Vice President of the Gardner Group. I have spent the last 30 years in our healthcare system, from hospital administration and from the policymaking side as a former staffer in the Florida House of Representatives Committee on Healthcare, and spent some time over at the Florida Agency for Healthcare Administration as well from a regulatory side. I also served formally on the South Florida HIMSS board as the Advocacy Chair, and I am so delighted to introduce to you Ms. Senator Anna Marie Rodriguez, a true trusted friend and colleague to me for over many years. And interestingly, Anna Marie Rodriguez is the state senator for Florida's 40th district, which includes portions of Miami-Dade County and all the way down to the end of Monroe County. She was elected in November of 2020 and reelected in 2022 for a second term. She served previously in the Florida House of Representatives 105th district from 2018 to 2020. And before being elected to the state house, she served on the city of Doral City Council from 2010 and 2018. And Senator Rodriguez, it is such a pleasure to have you join me today.
Lisa, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit further about HIMSS and everything that people will be expecting, during advocacy days and whatnot.
Well, thank you, Senator. And one thing I really admire about Senator Rodriguez is the fact that she comes to the table from a true health IT perspective. When Senator Rodriguez served on the Doral City Council, we worked together with the South Florida Regional Extension Center. It was a federally funded grant program that helped small physician practices from Indian River down to Key West adopt electronic health records. So Senator Rodriguez is unique in the fact that she comes to the table with hands-on experience in health information technology. But today we're going to speak about the Integrate annual meeting, the South Florida HIMSS annual meeting around advocacy. We have a panel discussion scheduled for that event where Senator Gail Harold will also be joining us. But in lieu of that event, I did want to speak a little bit about the value of advocacy. South Florida HIMSS is planning an advocacy day at the Capitol, as they have in years past. And Senator Rodriguez, I really wanted to get your opinion on the value of advocacy at the state Capitol.
Well, Lisa, I cannot overstate the importance of advocacy, not just at our state capitol, but at the federal level as well as the local level. But so much of what we do and so much of what impacts electronic health records and this industry is decided at the state level. And so I think it's important for people who are in this industry to attend their advocacy days in Tallahassee and get to know their legislators and meet with them and explain obviously the importance of why investing in this technology is important for the state and for all Floridians. And so I think, as you mentioned, I served on the city council for 8 years and I was a state representative, and now I'm in the state senate. But the relationships that I built over the decades, such as, with people like yourself, who, taught me the importance of it and gave me the opportunity to work in this cutting edge industry, really taught me a lot. And I'll talk a little bit more about my background as far as, professionally. I worked at Baptist Health prior to working with you at the South Florida Regional Extension Center. And of course, I knew the importance of electronic health records and technology in healthcare in general. But, having worked in that field with you opened my eyes even more and taught me so much. But now as a policymaker, as a decision maker in Tallahassee, I feel like I've come full circle, and I'm just so honored to be part of your panel at the conference. So I'm very excited about that.
Well, thank you, Senator. And speaking of advocacy, what you've mentioned, when I worked in the Florida House of Representatives, we were visited routinely and daily by lobbyists. And then we were also visited by groups like South Florida HIMSS, the College of Emergency Physicians, the Florida Hospital Association Advocacy Days. And that really gave me an opportunity to meet what I call the boots on the ground type of individual who's working in this industry. And I found those advocacy days to be extremely valuable, because often what I would do is, I would collect the business cards of those individuals in the advocacy day at the Capitol. And if I had a question that came up in a bill I was analyzing or a bill that I was writing for the House of Representatives, I would often call on these advocates that would give me a real life picture on any possible unintended consequences in drafting a law that would say X, Y, Z, that without that input from what I call the boots on the ground, the operational people, I would have not considered in the past. And I'm wondering, Senator Rodriguez, in your position as senator, how do you use these advocates that you meet through these advocacy days at the Capitol?
So those are great points, Lisa. And it's funny because I do meet with all kinds of industry groups, whether it's healthcare, housing, transportation, education, you name it. And I think it's important for advocates such as yourself and South Florida HIMSS to know that lawmakers are not subject matter experts on everything. So we do depend greatly on people such as yourself and people from your organizations to come and teach us even more, even though, as you said, I'm one of those unique cases, and Senator Harrell, where we, because of our professional backgrounds, we do know a little bit more than other lawmakers. But the vast majority may not know exactly why your issue is important. So breaking it down to a very, basic level, you try to keep all your information on 1 or 2 pages of information, which you would leave behind, right, for the lawmaker or the staff person who's in the process of crafting the legislation that needs to get more information. I think being readily accessible as well, whether it's giving them your cell phone number, your email, some way that they can contact you if they have questions or not sure, how to phrase something properly. That's always, really important. And then just trying to be brief when you meet with your legislator. A lot of them are on very tight time schedules. So just making sure that, when you go in to meet with them, be kind, be nice, but you don't necessarily have to be in their face for an extended period of time. You need to just try to get your message across as quickly as possible and as succinctly as possible so that they can move on with their day. And then if they have questions, they are always able to call you back and ask you any questions they may have. But for the most part, I think those are the tips I would give somebody who is advocating at our state capitol is, again, try to keep your information on 1 page, try to keep your meeting concise, stick to the point, and try not to get into the weeds because, again, not all of us are subject matter experts. So I think it's important for you to just touch the high level points about what your legislation is trying to do or what your organization is trying to accomplish.
That's a really good point. I remember as a staff and writing bill analysis, we would, write an analysis on every bill considered in committee. And in that bill analysis, regardless if it was a 1-page bill or a 150-page bill, we would do an analysis, but the cover sheet of that analysis was less than one full page long. And we would have to summarize in high-level bullets the important changes that were being considered in the proposed legislation. And you make a really good point. Legislators hear from constituents across the state and typically only have a few minutes to meet with their constituents when they're at the Capitol. And to be able to summarize in very succinct messaging really, I think, helps to convey your position and help to educate the members on what's happening in the industry. So I love that recommendation on keeping it succinct when you meet with the members of both the House and the Senate. Also, I was wondering, Senator, do you have like a real life example where an advocacy group really changed the direction either you were considering on a piece of legislation or an advocacy effort that actually inspired you to draft legislation and or help support legislation?
Ready to elevate your brand with 5-star impact? Welcome to the Funnel Brand Podcast, your gateway to exceptional personal growth and innovative business strategies. Join me as I unveil the insider strategies of industry pioneers and branding experts. Discover how to supercharge your business development, harness the power of AI for growth, and sculpt a personal brand that stands out in the crowd. Transform ambition into achievement. Explore more at firestarbdm.com for a wealth of resources. Ignite your journey with our brave brand blueprint and begin crafting your standout 5-star future today.
Well, I actually have multiple examples of this, not just as a state legislator, but when I was on the advocacy side and seeing my efforts influencing the outcome of legislative changes. And I want to touch on something important, Lisa, because as you said, you were in the staff in the Florida House of Representatives, and I was on the advocacy side when we met just a few years ago, right? So it was like over 20 years ago. And you were
a baby then.
I was a baby. You were a baby too. We were both babies.
Yes.
And it's funny, having a good relationship with staff is also extremely important. I can't underestimate, how, people think, oh, just meet with the legislator. And like I said, not all of us are subject matter experts. And I think it's important for you to always, as an advocate, make sure you keep the contact information of the staff person in that department or that works for that legislator, because those are the ones who are going to be staying in the office late. They're going to be drafting the bills, that are going to be making sure everything is perfect in the bill, right? So I just wanted to touch on that real quick. But there's many examples of advocacy, where I was influenced and I was able, to make a really positive change. One of the things that I'm really passionate about is people with special needs. And I have filed several pieces of legislation to improve the lives of these individuals in the state of Florida. One of them is creating a special designation on your vehicle registration that indicates it's a voluntary program. It's not mandatory, but would let someone say, I have a person with special needs in my car, whether it's a spouse, a child, or so that if they get pulled over or for whatever reason, the law enforcement officer will know that there's somebody, with a special need in the car ahead of time. Because sometimes these people have very, adverse reactions to traumatic situations, or if there was a car accident or something of that nature. So this was something that was brought to me by an advocacy group for people with special needs. And it was a big deal, when we passed it last year. So I always like getting ideas from specific groups that can tell me, hey, this is something that will make our lives better. This is something that's going to help us out. So yeah, I think any good legislator will always take into consideration information from advocacy groups who know best what's best for their industry.
Yeah, that's a really good example. And it reminds me too of some of the work that the South Florida HIMSS group did a couple of years ago, back in 2019. Interoperability, the concept of interoperability has been one of the key issues of the South Florida HIMSS group. Whether that's interoperability between EHRs, through the care continuum, or utilizing data interoperable between state agencies. And I know the South Florida HIMSS group got very active a couple of years ago with Representative Grant's bill that mandated interoperability between state agencies. And the result of that advocacy efforts led to the passage of that bill, which created the Florida digital system under Department of Management Services. So right now at the state agency level, specifically at the HHS agency level, like Medicaid and Department of Health and Department of Children and Families, we're starting to see a lot of sharing of information that can help the constituents of Florida. So, for example, one of the things, sort of a use case that we discussed with the South Florida HIMSS advocacy days back in 2019 was the value of sharing data from Department of Children and Families. So if a family had applied for WIC or SNAP benefits, you typically have to complete a comprehensive application. But these same family groups also may qualify for Medicaid coverage. And one of the things we were trying to achieve was that if an individual filled out an application for SNAP or WIC benefits at Department of Children and Families, that application could be what we call interoperable, so that it would also be shared with the state Medicaid agency to determine whether or not that individual qualified for Medicaid. And another great use case of interoperability between state agencies that we advocated for back then was the fact that when parents go to register their children in school, you actually have to have the child's vaccination record. Well, interestingly enough, the Department of Health in Florida has a registry, a vaccination registry called SHOTS that records all vaccinations in the state of Florida. Pediatricians report that up to the state of Florida. And one of the use cases we discussed was the value of when the parent came in to register their child at school, that instead of having to go to the doctor and get copies of everything, that the Department of Education should have access to the SHOTS database to check and see if that child that child has met all the vaccination requirements. So that was an interesting advocacy process that we went through several years ago. And I'm happy to say that's a real life example of bills passing based on advocacy efforts from the South Florida HIMSS group.
Lisa, and I think it's important to know, and if I may, a lot of the things you said, they sound so easy and so smooth, like it just took like one session. And and I know, and I think anyone who's in the advocacy world knows, a lot of the things you just said have taken years, if not decades, to happen, right? Because there's always a tremendous resistance to change, and there's always a resistance to sharing information, because people feel like information is power. And why am I going to share my information with you, even if it's all part of the government, taking care of Floridians, right? And like you said, there could be a Floridian that has an issue in the Department of Children and Families, but is also facing other financial, some other crises in their life. Why not make it easy for us as the government? I mean, I know you're not in the government anymore, but in my world, it should be easy to connect all those dots, right? And to make it easy for us to say, okay, this person has XYZ needs. Let's close the loop and have a continuum of care where we could, make sure this person has all their needs taken care of. And so, like you said, it was a big puzzle kind of like to put together. But honestly, it's well worth it because it does make Floridians' life much easier. It makes our life on the government side easier as well to help that person in their totality.
You make a really good point. And, just as a real example, one of the bills that passed during last session was a mandate that all licensed healthcare facilities actually had to participate in the Florida Health Information Exchange. And that was in 2024. So if we push the reverse button, I actually headed up the initiative in the state of Florida under Governor Bush to create the Florida HIE back in 2004. Yeah. And, we had, the program up and running in its infancy as far back as 2006. But to your point, Senator Harold, it actually took almost 2 decades before the industry was willing to accept the fact that a health information exchange throughout the state and sharing information from provider organization to provider organization or to provider was of value. And change is not easy, as you mentioned. And oftentimes we see a good policy idea. In my experience, it's taken about typically 3 years on a minimum to pass a bill that has a really good concept. And even though in 2019, when the South Florida HIMSS group was advocating on this HHS interoperability requirement, that too was a project that was in process for about 2 or 3 years before we actually saw the legislation pass. So advocacy, is a great way to educate our policymakers, and to your point, Senator, also to educate the staff that are helping to support the elected officials. So my last question to you, Senator, is what do you expect in the upcoming Integrate conference with our fireside chat between myself and you and Senator Harold? What would you like to see at the end of the day?
Well, Lisa, I think it's always great to, when we talk about advocacy, to kind of frame the picture and talk about, like you said, kind of give people an overview of kind of where all the steps that were involved to get to where we are today. And just kind of, if we each had our own little crystal ball, like what would we like to see coming out of the next legislative session or two? Because I think, because Governor DeSantis is finishing his last 2 years in office, we need to just start planning ahead, and there will be, transition in our, governor's office. And I think the governor's office, as you mentioned, under the leadership of Governor Bush, years ago, this was something that was very important to him, right? So whoever ends up taking that role in the future is going to be pivotal in deciding the future of HIE. And so we need to make sure that whoever those candidates are, which we already know who some of them may possibly be, those are conversations that need to start happening early so that we explain the importance of why it's, why they need to invest and why the state needs to continue being a forward-facing state in this arena and others, but particularly as it relates to this, because it affects so many people's, health and just in so many different ways. So I think it's going to be a great conversation. I'm excited to see you in person and to see Senator Harold, my dear colleague, as well.
Thank you so much.
I tell you, this has been wonderful. I want to thank you both for being on the Follow Brand podcast and the visibility that you brought for the chapter on advocacy. A lot of people aren't familiar with the value that a HIMSS chapter brings, specifically in their area, that they can be a voice for change, a voice for things to get done. And Lisa and Senator Rodriguez, I want to thank you personally for all your service, the things that you've been doing for our people that have made our lives just a little bit better than if you were not an advocate for healthcare in the state of Florida. So I want to thank you both again. And before I leave you, let the audience know, because I'm sure they're like, hey, you know what? That was great intel. What is the best way to get in touch with each of you? And I'll let Senator Rodriguez go first, and then we'll finish up with Lisa Rawlins.
So the best way for people to reach me is through my legislative office. I'm actually located in Doral, Florida, down near Miami International Airport. I'm also on LinkedIn. I also happen to be on Facebook and X and everything else, and Instagram. But I prefer for legislative things to come in through my office, through my legislative office. So
excellent.
At the flsenate.gov, www.flsenate.gov.
Got it. Ms. Lisa Rawlins.
Yes, Grant. Probably the easiest way for me, as I mentioned in my introduction, I'm serving as the vice president of the Gardner Group based out of Tallahassee. But I also have a LinkedIn profile, and I could be reached there or via email at lrawlins@thegardner.group would also be a good way to get in touch with me.
Excellent. And if anyone wants more information about the South Florida HIMSS conference, please go to our website. You can easily Google HIMSS South Florida Integrate. Will pop right up. And it will be a sold-out event, so get there, get your tickets as soon as possible. We've got just a marquee lineup. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can look at all of our different episodes on the Follow Brand Podcast at 5-Star BDM. That is the number 5, that star, the speed for brand, D for development, M for masters.com. I want to thank you both again for being on the show.
Thank you, Grant.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us on the Follow Brand Podcast. Big thanks to Full Effect Productions for their incredible support on each and every episode. Now the journey continues on our YouTube channel, Follow Brand TV series. Dive into exclusive interviews, extended content, and bonus insights that will fuel your success. Subscribe now and be a part of our growing community, sharing and learning together. Explore, engage, and elevate at Follow Brand TV series on YouTube. Stay connected, stay inspired. Till next time, we will continue building a 5-star brand that you can follow.